she perpetuated this lie that they need it and that it's good and okay. They packaged it really nice and pretty so that it would look okay, and ignoring the fact that it was human life by focusing on, oh, it's since you're a minority, since you're poor, take over your, like, be empowered by getting abortion. They've said that this is empowering. So they've spun it to be this like empowering thing, but it's really the most, it's not, it's the opposite of that. So I was born and raised in Minnesota near the Twin Cities. I'm the oldest of 4 kids, so definitely like the bossy one, like to be the leader of the household, a little too much. But yeah, that was a great time, very close to my family. Grew up in a Christian home. I'm actually Eastern Orthodox. I don't know if anyone has ever heard of that. It's not very well known, but grew up in an Eastern Orthodox family. I also went to a Christian school when I got to college and a homeschool co-op during high school. So very much in that conservative Christian homeschool realm, and grew up also being taught what abortion was and why we are pro-life as Christians, but especially like even as human beings, we should be pro-life. So my mom really was my mentor and educator growing up about that. And as I got into high school, that's when I realized the magnitude of what abortion really was. I didn't realize, I was taught when I was younger what it was, but as I got older, I was like, oh my goodness, this is something we just can't ignore. So I got more involved in activism and helping people that were running for like our state senate or for even like city council and mayor. I would help campaign for those pro-life candidates because I knew how important it was to put pro-life laws in place. And then as I got into college, I actually wasn't planning to go into a pro-life career. I was like, well, this is just my side gig. Like I know what I believe, but this is not like my full-time life's work. But then the day infanticide was legalized in New York, that was my freshman year of college, something like lit up in my heart. My heart like ignited with this passion I've never felt before. And I just felt God telling me, like, this is going to be your life's mission. This is going to be what you're going to do with your life. You're going to fight to protect my children. And it was just so powerful. I can't even like it was just so powerful. Can't put words to it. But so the next day I changed my major. I was originally going to be a psychologist, like go into therapy and stuff and counseling. But the next day I changed my major to a pro-life career path. So I changed it to a political communications and family advocacy major. So basically like a lot of communication classes, political science, and family studies kind of all put together. So it was the interdisciplinary studies program, which I could basically create my own major, which was really nice so I could tailor it to what I wanted to do. Then I graduated in December, and I've been with Students for Life ever since I started college. I started a pro-life group at my University of Northwestern in St. Paul, Minnesota. And I was like, oh, this is a Bible college. So I'm like, there's a pro-life group here. When I first went there, there wasn't. And I was very surprised. But then I was like, well, I guess I'm gonna have to start one, even though I didn't want to, but I felt like God was calling me to start one, even though I really didn't want to deep down. But I was like, okay, I feel this calling, I should do it. One of the best decisions I ever made because it taught me leadership skills, helped me grow in my apologetics, and even just what I'm doing now today as in the pro-life movement. And that's Students for Life is who I work for now. And I built that relationship ever since I started my chapter at my school. And they've given me so many opportunities, leadership opportunities, as well as relationships that have grown for me, and to lead me to where I am now. And right now I'm working as their public relations and policy coordinator. So basically I'm their lobbyist and media spokesperson when it comes to legislation and pro-life politics. So that's where I am now. I'm in Fredericksburg, Virginia, living here and working for them.
So I have a question for anybody that doesn't, I'm sure people in the comments have this question as well, but you said something happened in New York, what did you say?
Infanticide.
What is that? And what is that?
So infanticide is basically, but it's already after the baby is born. So it's as they're either there's called partial birth abortion, so that's where they kill the baby as it's being born. Infanticide is where they kill the baby if it's in a failed abortion, they're already out of the womb, and the doctor or nurse holding the baby, and they still kill the baby if that was a botched abortion. So that's what infanticide is. Very gruesome, barbaric, and that was legalized in New York. I believe it was 2018. That's when I was a freshman in college.
2018.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, I didn't know that. So a lot of people, I mean, I would assume a lot of people, maybe everybody else already knew this, but I didn't know that that's actually legal. Like, you know, sometimes you hear like, you know, there's a thing where you can so-and-so this law or that law can turn into this, but so it's actually legal for them to like kill a baby after it's born?
Yep. And it's even being pushed in Maryland right now and Colorado to do the same thing. I know Colorado just passed a very pro-abortion bill. I think it was, I forget exactly, I don't think it was infanticide, but I think it might have been partial birth. But yeah, that Colorado, Maryland, and New York are definitely very pro-abortion, and New York passed that just a few years ago. So it's very much, very much getting to be very extreme, which is sad.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I didn't even know they can do that.
Yeah.
That's news to me.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, more states, more liberal states are pushing it, which is really heartbreaking because I don't know if you've ever seen Students for Life posted recently drawings of what a partial birth abortion is. And basically, and that this is not even infanticide, like this is as they're being born. And it's just so gruesome. I don't need to go into every single detail, but it's literally like as the baby's being born, the mom could decide in that moment, oh, I want to abort my baby. And then be like, okay, even though they were prepared to deliver and keep this baby alive, she can decide any moment, like, oh, I don't want it anymore.
So what do they do in that like situation? Like what sort of abortion? Like how are they, I guess, getting rid of the baby?
Yeah. So, well, what partial birth abortion the process is, as they're being born, they take scissors, cut its neck, and then crush its head. And
Oh
so,
my God.
and then pull it out. So,
God.
yeah, it's very, very disgusting. And after, most often, the baby doesn't obviously survive that. So the baby doesn't have a chance to even cry because that's what really, they know that it's obvious when a baby is crying that it's a human being alive and breathing. So they try to avoid having that baby like show that it's a living human being. So after that, then they just consider the baby as medical waste, and they
Oh my.
either they put it in containers and give it to the medical waste people that pick it up in boxes, and will whatever they do with that medical waste, whether they throw it out or burn it, they will just discard it and not even. And there's some states though that require babies that are aborted to bury them, which is like obviously we don't want abortion, but we got to treat them with dignity if they are killed, and we appreciate those laws that bury them, but most often they're not. They're just thrown in the trash like this in
So
containers to be discarded.
before we keep going, I just
Uh,
so I'm on Center for Medical Progress.org. Just because I was just curious what the partial birth abortion looks like, and I'm not sure exactly if you're able to see this, but it looks like this is
Yep.
kind of a step by step. So
Yep. That's
naturally,
actually,
at this stage where my baby is currently, because me and my wife are expecting, the baby's head is going to be facing down. So they twist it back up to where the head is facing the other way. They pull the legs out first, then they pull the shoulders out to where the neck is exposed, and take a device to break the back of the neck right there. And then I guess that's so they can't hear like you said, the crying, and they just kind of go from there. I didn't know I didn't know that that's legal in the United States, like right now.
Yeah, it's very, very sad and heartbreaking. And I don't know if you've heard about the initiative Justice for the five babies that were found in DC, that had signs of partial birth abortion. And it happened about almost 2 weeks ago now in DC. These 5 babies were discovered at the late stages in the 3rd trimester, fully formed babies that had crushed skulls, snapped necks, were ripped apart, and they were found in these boxes by pro-lifers that were just going to be thrown out. And that's illegal in DC. Partial birth abortion is illegal. The Congress passed to make partial birth abortion illegal. So in DC, that's technically illegal, but the police department is not doing anything about it right now. And a lot of pro-life groups have been pushing for them to do an investigation and autopsy, because there's clearly very overwhelming signs that they were had partial birth abortion. So it's very, very much the most gruesome abortion, because the baby's fully formed, about to be born, and they can definitely feel every single thing. They can feel that pain.
Yeah, that's like straight up murder. Because whenever I thought about abortion, I always thought, like, I don't know the technical names of like all the stages of a baby, but I always thought of it like it's like a seed, you know what I mean? They just kind of take the seed out, and it's like nothing really like happens for real. But when you talk about partial birth abortions and then the baby being born and then aborted, it's like, God, it's like a whole another level of abortion.
Yeah. It's
That's
crazy.
wild.
So it's kind of I don't know, it's interesting to me because I don't think most people know. Like, I didn't know this, I didn't know this was legal. And I think that sometimes people wonder why people like purely vote on that issue alone. Since you're someone that's very, into the political realm and things like that, how important do you think abortion is or should be when it comes to voting from a Christian perspective? And then why?
That's a great question. I think it should be the top issue. It is the most important issue, in my opinion, because without the right to life, no other rights exist. We can't have the right to liberty, the right to pursue an education, or even anything in life without having our life. So abortion, voting pro-life first is, if you're going to vote on one issue, vote on that. Obviously, there are a lot of other important issues. I'm not saying there aren't any other important issues to think about when you're voting. But if I had a choice between a pro-life, pro-choice candidate, whatever election it is, I'm going to, in a heartbeat, choose the pro-life candidate, because they understand the sanctity of human life matters and should be valued. And if our government or a political figure that has power to make big decisions doesn't even realize the value of human life, then that's walking on very thin ice for a dangerous society, and playing with morals and ethics there. And it's very a fine line of where morality and what is right and what's wrong gets fuzzy. So that's why I think it's so important we vote pro-life first, because if we don't, then human life is just going to be considered trash, not valued, and then we have a culture of death, which is not something we want as a society. Even if you're not Christian, I don't think anyone would want a society that promotes a culture of death, which abortion does just that.
So you obviously been in politics for a while and have studied it for a couple of years. But what about people that, we're just living our regular lives, and how do we know which person is pro-life and which one's not? It's not like people go on stage and say, I want partial birth abortions, and someone says, I don't. Like, no one really, I don't hear a lot of people in, I guess, like the big political speeches and stuff just say, hey, we want this abortion procedure to happen where we pull the baby out and do it. Like, who are the people that's pushing this? Because I never hear them give any speeches about, like, yes, we want these things and things like that. What do you say to the people that maybe aren't as political savvy as you are? How can we tell the difference? Like, how do we know?
Yeah. Well, it's pretty simple. Most often now people will say, "Oh, I'm pro," or I say pro abortion because they like to frame it as something pro choice seems much better than pro abortion. Really, it's pro abortion. But they usually people pro choice, then that shows that they're going to be for most things. However, we don't truly know unless they actually say it, like, oh, I'm pro. They're not going to say I'm pro partial birth abortion. None of them really say that. They usually just say that I'm pro women's choice and all that. And you kind of have to just watch what they do in their actions. So, for example, like Kamala Harris, she has a very long history of pushing very extreme abortion laws and abortion agendas, and has worked with the most pro-abortion organizations in America. And even to prosecute pro-lifers that discovered Planned Parenthood covering up human sex trafficking and abuse. She's tried to prosecute people who have exposed that and exposed the truth. So just from that action, you can tell she's the most extreme you can get. So she's one example that showed through her actions. So honestly, follow pro-life organizations on Instagram. Like, it's super easy for someone who's political, but they're really passionate about the life issue. Follow Students for Life. Follow Live Action. They'll give news, the latest news, very quick, easy to understand for like the average person who's not political, and they'll inform you on what to be aware of, the most important stories, and apologetics, which is great.
So,
So
how do we know, like, I guess for just playing, I guess you could talk about like devil's advocate or whatnot. Like, for someone that doesn't know a lot about politics, how do I know, for example, like, you just don't like Kamala Harris because of whatever? How do I know you don't just dislike her? So you're saying she's for this. Like, I've just heard her say she just is for women's rights, or someone else is just for women's rights. I've never heard them say they're for, killing a baby like that. How can we figure out who's, you get what I'm saying? Like, how do we understand that? Because that's one thing that I see a lot of people struggle with, is they don't follow politics until it's election time. And on election time, nobody says, oh, by the way, I'm for partial birth abortions. So you said some of the key words were,
like bodily, yeah, like pro, like women's choice. They'll say women's choice, women's health care. They'll try to cover it up with pretty words to cover up the evil behind it. But no one ever, yeah, like you said, it's really hard. No one ever comes out as like, I'm for this.
okay.
So it's honestly, anyone that says they're pro-choice, I would stay clear from when it comes to voting. Don't ever vote for someone that says they're pro-choice, no matter how extreme or not extreme they are. Always, and every candidate will say whether they're pro-life or pro-choice. So always go for the pro-life candidate. And if there are multiple pro-life candidates, then you can start looking at like their track record if you wanted to get more research. But usually it's a one or the other, very polar opposite today. So like during the presidential election, I could ask anyone and they would know who was the pro-life candidate, who was the pro-choice candidate, because most often the Democrats are going to be pro-choice. Most often the Republicans are going to be pro-life. That's just kind of how it is. There are some pro-life Democrats, pro-choice Republicans, but they make it clear.
Interesting. Okay.
And using the term pro-choice it does make it sound like it's a good thing, right? Like, because in my heart of hearts, like, I want people to like have their own choices, right, about their body, about, the decisions that they make. But biblically speaking, there's only one decision that should be made. You should be leaning one way and not the other. So yeah, I agree with you on that. The word pro-choice makes it sound like it's such a good thing, but it's really not.
Yeah. Yeah, they'll package it really nicely, be like, oh, women deserve the right to have bodily autonomy, to choose what's best for them, especially in rape cases. That is the most common argument you'll get. What about rape and incest? And even in that situation, abortion is not the answer to their pain and their suffering. Abortion adds on to that. It adds trauma. It takes away the child, and it shows, oh, it's putting more violence on top of violence because abortion is violent. And the baby shouldn't have to pay for the father's crime. So that just shows that because someone else violated me, I'm going to violate someone else's body. And that's what they're doing to that baby that was conceived in rape. Obviously, that was horrible how for the mother, what she went through, and the person that raped her should be punished to the fullest extent. However, the baby should not have to pay for the father's crime. And that's the biggest argument I hear with like pro-choice is okay in this situation. And I'm like, no, never in any situation is okay for us to take an innocent human life.
So what about the 16-year-old who got pregnant that lives in the hood, doesn't have much money, doesn't have any resources, can't really take care of the baby, doesn't have a father figure already? What about that person? What do you say to that person?
Well, there actually are resources. That's what a lot of people say. There's like no resources. There's called pregnancy resource centers, and there are more pregnancy resource centers than abortion clinics. And you can find your local crisis pregnancy center. Actually, Students for Life started an initiative called Standing With You. And you go to the website standingwithyou.org, and you can look up your zip code and find all your local pregnancy centers. Super easy, just a couple clicks. And they're free. These resources are free. For Planned Parenthood, you have to pay hundreds of dollars for an abortion. And these Planned Parenthoods are actually put purposely in minority communities and where they're in poverty and very low income, because they know these are the people that are going to be seeking help, but they get government funding, so they get way more money than the pregnancy resources, so they can't market themselves as much and be promoted because the media doesn't like the pro-life movement, so they don't get any promotion or get well known because it's all being focused on Planned Parenthood. So there's actually those resources that help women even after the baby is born. They help them with college, giving them scholarships, having parenting classes, helping them find a job, housing, giving them food, and even baby clothes and supplies. And as they're pregnant, they help them with their appointments, ultrasounds, giving them even more pregnancy resources, and counseling services. The options are endless. And they even offer STD testing, pregnancy tests, and free ultrasounds, which is amazing. And a lot of that stuff would be very expensive and very Planned Parenthood as well. But Planned Parenthood doesn't offer like most of those pregnancy resources at all. They offer mostly abortions, because people will say, oh, they offer all these other resources and services. I don't care if they just kill one baby and 95% of their services are good. That's still wrong. That's still that doesn't justify them killing a life. So yeah, it's very, a lot of people think, oh, but what about these young girls? It's like, there's so many resources for them at these centers that are there to help them, take care of them. Like, I know some pregnancy resource centers that keep the relationships to this day, and the children that they saved are teenagers. So it's not just like, oh, the baby's born, bye. No, they help them throughout their entire life. And it's very obvious that those relationships are still kept just through some of the very like local stories from my state.
Wait, so talk about that more. You said they're planning these clinics or facilities in minority, like impoverished communities on purpose?
Yep. I believe it's 80 to 85% of Planned Parenthoods are in minority and impoverished communities. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. And it goes back to Margaret Sanger, who founded Planned Parenthood. She even said she started what was called the Negro Project, and it was specifically to eliminate the Black population. And she was the founder. So you can see it to this day that they're still put in the minority communities. And you can see that throughout the history. And people have called into Planned Parenthood asking, can you abort specifically a Black baby with my money? And they're like, yep, we can do that. So, and it's on video, live action, caught that on video.
Wait, what?
Mm-hmm.
Really?
That's what Kamala Harris was trying to prosecute those people that discovered those things.
So, okay, hold on.
Wait a minute. You might have say. Go ahead.
So what I typically hear most of the time, like I said, I'm not like an expert in this, but usually what I hear is like people that are anti-abortion are white, it's like, that's like the white, you know, conservative male opinion. Why is that, if that's really what's going on here?
Yeah, a lot of people will say that. And it might have been like 30 years ago, a few decades ago, might have been true. A lot of, they say old white men. And it might have been that decades ago. However, that is definitely not true today. And I don't even think it was really organizations. It's mostly women that are doing this. And not only, and not, it's not just white women. Half of the people I know that I work with, like on the front lines, are from all different backgrounds. They're, they're Latina, African, Ethiopian, and from all these different backgrounds and different colors of skin. And people say, oh, it's all white old men. And we're all young women too, or young men doing this on the front lines. So I think it's very it's a myth that is going around, and it's pretty obvious if you just look at if you look up some pro-life organizations that and photos of young people at rallies, you can tell it's very diverse. And I work with a lot of there's pro-life organizations too that are atheist and progressive. So I know people that are atheist and homosexual, and they're very pro-life, and that's their work. So you don't have to even be from a certain background or religious background or political background to be pro-life. Oh, the law shouldn't take away people's free will and all this stuff. Well, we can get back to like Nazi Germany if we don't draw a line of when human life begins and when it should be protected. Mm. So if the law doesn't establish when life should be protected, then it's going to be, hell's going to break loose, because then no one has value, no one should be protected, and then no one's safe. So it's so important that the government, because the government's role is to protect people. Mm-hmm. And if it can't protect the most innocent of human life, then why do we have the government? The government is supposed to protect people, and set laws so it can protect people.
And it's supposed to protect the weakest people.
Mm-hmm.
Because from a societal perspective, right? The better a civilization is, the better the better the weakest person in the civilization can thrive. So, for example, the opposite of an organized, good civilization is what? Just the wilderness, the jungle, chaos. You know, chaos, the desert, where the forest, wherever, where the animals run wild. The strong right. Eat the weak, right? The better a society is, the better quality of life the weakest person in that society can have. Mm-hmm. So to piggyback on what you said, if you can't take care, if you're refusing to take care of the weakest people, you can't claim that you're at the pinnacle of where you could be. There's always there's more room for growth. Just like at one time, you know, people who were other ethnicities, Jim Crow laws, women, all these other things, they didn't have the same rights as other people. And so we had to grow into that and say, okay, we're going to start giving these people right, because we got to live up to every man and woman is made in the image of God.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah. And with abortion, decides who's worth living and who's not. We have no right to say if that person's worth living over this other life. And if we do that, we eventually will get to this very dark path of saying, oh, you have a disability, oh, you're not worthy of life, okay, you can die. And people like in Iceland, it's Down syndrome is actually extinct. Like there's no Down syndrome because they abort all the babies that have Down syndrome, because they can tell in the womb if they have Down syndrome. So there's some countries that don't even have any Down syndrome babies because they abort them. But Down syndrome kids and adults say 97% of them say that they are happy and have the most joyful, happy lives. And I know Down syndrome people. They're so happy and innocent and like so full of life. But yet people say, oh, they have Down syndrome. Oh, they're not worthy of life. They're going to have a terrible life. We should kill them. Like that's putting worth on what, like saying people with disability. Like what about people that are already born with disabilities? Oh, or were they not worthy of? Oh, so they're less than us. No, that's putting value on and devaluing people just because they have a disability or and even certain there's sex selection abortions, race selection abortions. So that's putting value on
I wonder
who
how
they,
that works.
yeah, they
Because two
say
people get together, you know what race the baby's going to be. How does that work?
they just decide, oh, I don't want this baby because it's gonna look like this anymore. Because like people decide, oh, I'm gonna keep the baby. I'm like, oh, I actually don't want to keep the baby anymore. Like people can just change their mind, and that has happened. Or if someone was raped, which is very rare, because only 1% of the abortions. Someone was raped, didn't know who the rapist was, and they find out it's a mixed baby. Then, I mean, that's so rare, but like that has happened, and
Yeah.
people, and it's still wrong. But yeah, there's even laws in some states that say you can't abort based on race and sex, because that has happened and that people have tried to do that. So that's why there's laws set in place in some states.
Hmm. So how did it spin politically to be this, like, it almost seems like it should be a common sense thing, because I would argue, like I said with the lady that was on earlier, I would argue for the rights of other people for other issues as well. It's not a, oh well, you don't care once they're out of the womb. Like, no, I think that people should care for the homeless. I think people should care for the poor. I think we should create resources to where people won't have to go through any of these things. So I agree 100%.
Mm-hmm.
But how did it turn into this? How did it get twisted into this thing of like, it's a woman's right?
Mm-hmm.
How did it turn? How did it get so, like, I don't know, political, to where it's like, if you're for it, you automatically have all these thoughts. If you're against it, you automatically have all these thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Why has it been portrayed that way? And how did it come to be? If you know that, I don't know, but I assume you probably know some of it.
There's a lot of reasons. One of them, the sexual revolution. That was a huge deal because a lot of sex outside of marriage, a lot of uncommitted relationships left them single mothers and in situations where they weren't financially stable. Actually, it was the Black community that had more stable homes during that time and had more didn't have less abortions because they had a father figure and a mother figure together in a home. That's the foundation of our society, is the family. But when the family broke during the sexual revolution, it became very more common for divorce, more common for sex outside of marriage. And no matter if you're a Christian or not, this is just statistics. This is science here, and people studying this throughout the decades. Because without having the family, more abortions were occurring. And when you go outside the design of a family, that's where hell breaks loose. And so that's a main reason. Also, another reason is welfare. So a lot of women realize if they're single mothers and are having kids, and sometimes abortions too, on top of that, they can get on welfare and get free money. Then more abortions are happening, so they could have some kids and then they have some abortions, and then they can decide. But they can have sex all they want and be with all these partners, so they can have that freedom.
So
Also,
now I will say personally, I do think that, like I said earlier, if I am going to be consistent with the lowest, the weakest, the most vulnerable people should be protected in a society, I still think that there should be something for people that are in situations that need it, right? Now I guess my question is, like, why is it viewed as a white male heterosexual conservative blah blah blah, all these other things that I don't fall into and a lot of other people don't fall into? Why is it twisted that way?
because a lot of the politicians are white old men, but the people that don't have political power that are in the movement are not that. So they look at the political figures because they're the ones on TV, they're the ones speaking, they're the ones making laws. But however, the pro-abortion side has nothing to say about it because guess who are the 9 people who decided Roe v. Wade? All old white men who decided Roe v. Wade.
Mm.
They have nothing to say because the people that legalized abortion were old white men that didn't know the magnitude of how human life should be protected, ignored it, and we're going with how the progressive society that we were becoming. So it's they have nothing to say with that, and they can ignore that fact that it was all 9 old white men who decided this.
So speaking of this, someone just asked a question, and I'll let you answer this because it may be directed towards you. But it says, do you think only women should have a say in abortion issues or both sexes?
Absolutely both sexes. Because it's a human rights issue. It doesn't discriminate on gender. Just because women are the ones getting pregnant, the men are the ones that are getting these women pregnant. They have a responsibility to those women and their children. They actually, I think men should be even more of a voice than what they are now because they have a responsibility, and abortion doesn't keep men responsible. It allows them to do whatever they want, get women pregnant, and leave them with no strings attached and not having to take care of the children. So abortion actually perpetuates this idea of men taking over women, in my opinion. And it just, and it's very easy. And a lot of actually, it's 60 something percent. I forget exactly what number, but it's 60 something percent of women are coerced and forced into abortions by their boyfriend, father.
You said 60%?
It's like 60 something percent.
Wow.
It might be 70 now. It's a big number. It's more than half. I know. More than half of women are coerced and pushed into these abortions by men usually because men don't want to be responsible. I'm not saying all men are bad. I'm not being sexist here. It's just like when it comes to abortion, that's usually the case.
That's the motivation behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And
Wow.
yeah, so men should have a voice in it for sure.
What do you think?
Yeah, and I mean, I've got to imagine there's a lot of steps that get kind of skipped in that whole making a baby process to even get to the whole abortion side, right? Like, first, you didn't use a condom. Then it's like that person was on birth control. Then it's like you didn't get it's like a bunch of steps to even get to that point. But yeah, I think that's an interesting point about men just having to be responsible. Because think if abortion was not legal, like, anywhere, you wouldn't have that, like, escape plan at the end. Like, well, if it does happen, I can just get the abortion anyway, and then I'll just move on with my life. Like, I think you're right about that. It adds an element of responsibility to the man because he knows at the end of the day that if something happens, this baby's being born, and this is what it's going to be.
So my answer to the question is I would obviously say yes. Both genders should have a say. Because to me, it's almost like, I'll ask the audience. For anyone, someone please just tell me, it may take them a while, why should it only be women? I don't understand why people think it's like, oh, women should be able to be the one to decide and say. Why is that? And then while we're waiting on that, we can kind of discuss it. But for me, what do you think it is? Why do you think people say only women should decide that?
Well, because they're the ones having the children. They usually say, oh, no uterus, no opinion. If you're really going to get technical there, you could say, because men can get pregnant now. So you could say, oh, well, actually, men have a say now. But that's just a joke I usually do. But anyway, like, more serious, like,
But I don't understand the rationale. Why? Like, why do they say women? What's the reason why? Like, even just playing devil's advocate, what is the reason why people say, I want to know a woman's opinion on this? Why does that matter?
From my experience, I don't know if there's any questions that come up yet, but from my experience, it's because the feminist movement wants to have control, wants to be more powerful than men. So in order to do that, they need to have control over their body, and they don't want men to tell them what to do with their body. And that's becoming a big message in the feminist movement right now, bodily autonomy. So that's why they're thinking, oh, men are going to get in the way of that because a lot of men are making political decisions because that's a lot of men are in government.
So what? Okay, so let's break this down. What is bodily autonomy? What does that mean? What is that?
And for their definition, it's to do whatever they want with their body, whatever they say.
Go prostitute yourself and see what happens. In the words of Matt Chandler, you get arrested. Drive down the interstate naked at 95 miles per hour, get pulled over, see what happens. No one can do whatever they want with their body.
But that's their choice.
You're right. You're right. Choices have consequences.
That's their choice.
So for me, when people say like, "Oh, it's a woman's decision on that because she's the one that gets to decide the baby's fate," so okay, my question is this: if I'm just I'll just say my statement is this: I'm glad that the abolitionists didn't say, you know what? I mean, we don't own slaves, so we don't know what the effect would be like financially for us if we got rid of them. So we can't tell them what to do. We would be judging them. We can't judge them. I'm glad that they didn't take that mentality, because I probably wouldn't be here today. C-Love would be working in a yard somewhere, and we wouldn't
be in the field.
So I just think that is a very, I've just never understood that argument. Because like, oh well, you don't understand how much of an inconvenience it could be. I don't understand how much of an inconvenience it was for slave owners to pick their own cotton either. But it's not good for them to force other people to do it.
It's not an excuse to kill people and use them and abuse them. There's no excuse to do this to innocent people. And it boggles my mind how people use these excuses on like economics and mental health and like situations of suffering. That's not we're just going to kill the suffering so they don't have to deal with it. No, like I've spoke to many people who were in foster care all their life, who were abused sexually, verbally, physically, you name it, everything, of like unimaginable pain. But that they say, I would have never wanted my parents to abort me. I'm so glad I still have life. There's people on TikTok that have gotten famous, people in the foster care system. Like the pro-abortion people say that, these are the people quoting, that I'm invalid, that I should have died. That's so offensive. That is so offensive to people. Wow. And like, how can you tell someone who is in the foster care, who has a disability, oh, I would have probably aborted you if I knew you had this?
There was a girl that was on last week that said her dad wanted her to be aborted, and she said she never trusted him. Like she always had this like feeling of like she never trusted him, even till the day he died. She never really got that full, because like someone wanted you dead, wanted you to not be here, and I think that I think the issue is a lot of people look at it as like they're not here yet. They're like on the way. Their soul is like on the way, but it's like no, it's here. You're not preventing them from getting here. They're already here. Like matter, space,
and that was
time. You could, my wife weighs more. I'm not gonna say the number in case she's watching, but she weighs more now than she did before. Why? Because there's something that's already here. It's not on the way. It's already here. And so this idea of we could stop it before it gets going. No, it's already like the life has already begun. And yeah, go ahead.
Oh, or I don't know if he was going to say something. Were you going to say something?
I was going to say that was like the big disconnect between you and the last caller. Was she kind of viewed it as like how you gave the 3/5 of an like a man example. She views that as like 3/5 of a human, right? Like it's not fully developed. It's not out of the. It hasn't taken its first breath. It doesn't have a heart. She didn't view it as like a fully like developed human being, when we know it is a human being and it has life, right? So that was like the big disconnect between you and the last caller.
Yeah, it's ultimate. Oh, go ahead.
I'm not sure who this question is to, but I'll let you answer it. it says, do you think that the pastors should speak out to the church more on abortions, or are they doing it enough now?
I think they should definitely, I know some churches do talk about it, which is great, and some don't. So I obviously don't know every single church and what they talk about in their sermons, but I think every church should take a stand and talk about it. Um, and even if they don't take a stand, they should talk about it, because it's over half of the, actually, no, I think it's like 80 something percent. Actually, there's a new stat that just came out. Students for Life posted it, that over 80% of women went to church or consider themselves religious that get abortions. It's happening at Christian because they're fearing of the judgment when they're pregnant. So I think it's so important the church speaks out saying, we embrace this, we embrace you who have children, we're not going to judge you, but like they need to speak up, because I think all these women don't know how these churches are going to react, how their friends and family are going to react. They need to show that they're going to love and care for them no matter what, and for their children. Obviously, like as Christians, we shouldn't like, oh yeah, just have sex and whatever, like it's okay. Like, yes, there was a mistake, they shouldn't have done that out of wedlock. However, that doesn't say that the baby's invaluable and that the woman should be punished and all this stuff. No. So these women need to know that they're going to be taken care of and that they're going to be loved and not judged.
Well, I agree 100%. I would say though that the idea that they do that because the church has shown, some churches maybe, I'm sure some churches are not accepting of that and they may judge them and things like that, right? But if we go back to Genesis 3, after the fall, after Adam and Eve ate the fruit, they heard God walking in the garden. What was the first thing they did? They hid. It's a lie of the enemy that says, hey, if anyone finds out about this, they're not going to love you anymore. They're not going to care for you anymore. They're not going to do any of this. So even God, who never showed them any reason to not trust his love for them, they still pulled back and hid. So for anyone who's watching, if you're ever in that situation, it may be that your church is judgmental and doesn't love enough and things like that. And if that's it, then you need to get a new church. But even if you're at the most loving church, you're still going to have those voices coming from the back of your head. And that's the voice of the enemy. And you don't need to listen to that.
Yeah, to piggyback off what you said, I think there's a healthy level of like feeling a little shame that should come with that type of thing, right? But not something that should stop you from returning to the church or not showing up. But I think there should be like a healthy level.
I would say conviction rather than shame.
Conviction, yeah.
Because conviction says, hey, what I did was not smart. Shame says, I'm bad. I'm not worthy, anymore.
Yeah.
Like God doesn't love me anymore. When it's a slippery slope, There's a question that I think is also directed to you again. It says, why is it that people of color in America don't fully realize that the abortion industry is ultimately directed at eliminating them, in all caps? An overwhelming majority of abortions are babies of color. And you addressed it a little bit, but
that's what
the question. So go ahead.
We were talking about.
They're being lied to ever since the last couple hundred years, that they've been spewed this lie to them. You need abortion in order to succeed, and you need abortion in order to be happy and healthy. And Margaret Sanger started this lie when she started birth control, the birth control movement, Planned Parenthood, and abortion, eugenics, all that stuff. She perpetuated this lie that they need it and that it's good and okay. They packaged it really nice and pretty so that it would look okay, and ignoring the fact that it was human life by focusing on, since you're a minority, since you're poor, take over be empowered by getting abortion. They've said that this is empowering. So they've spun it to be this like empowering thing, but it's really it's the opposite of that. It's the complete opposite. So they've been given this lie, and I think we need to go back and take that back and be like, no, you've been so misled. And I really feel that we're losing the we're losing communities of people of color because of abortion, because they've been spewed this lie. So I think we need to spread the truth. That's why it's so important to talk about this, even though it's such a controversial thing. Like, we need to be speaking about this because a lot of people don't know that people of color are the ones that are targeted and killed most often in abortions.
So someone else asked, how can we prevent self-abortion or back road abortions in secret once abortions are made illegal everywhere?
Pregnancy resource centers. I will say that every time. There are more than any abortion industry clinics and all that. They just don't know about them. You have to. People need to know, because we don't get federally funded by the government. Planned Parenthood does, abortion clinics. Pregnancy centers don't have as many the resource to promote themselves, to make themselves known, but there are out there in communities. There are
So
several.
what do these resources provide specifically?
So, pregnancy resource centers offer free resources, by the way: ultrasounds, counseling sessions, STD testing, mammograms, resources for the baby and after they're born as well. And for housing, they've helped the mom get a job. They've helped with scholarships for college to have her get into classes, whatever class she needed to get into, and to help provide for her on campus if she's living on campus. So there's a lot of medical and mental resources for these women at these crisis pregnancy centers, and they're all over the place. They just don't know about them.
Mm-hmm. Somebody said that that they think that wholly banning abortions will lead to like unsafe abortions popping up. What's your response to that?
There won't be unsafe abortions if they have resources. So we want to make abortion not only illegal but unthinkable. So by promoting a culture of life, spreading the truth that they don't even have to think about abortion because they know it's wrong and they know that they have support and love. Like I said, over 80% of women feel like they have no support and are coerced and forced into abortions. So if we just show love, care, and support and give them resources instead of the pain and suffering that comes with abortion and Planned Parenthood, then they won't even have to think about back alley abortions. They won't have to think about getting self-induced abortions and possibly killing themselves just trying to get rid of the baby. We want to make it unthinkable because we're spreading the truth about that it's wrong. So people don't even have to think about it because they know that it's wrong. And also they have the resources, love, care, and support. So they don't even have to worry about, oh, I don't have the money. I don't have people to help me take care of the baby, because they already have that.
Something that I wanted to look up the quote to not misquote it. But to people that say that, safe abortion to me is kind of like saying a dry ocean. You know, like it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. And Chris Rock, you know, he said a lot of things, but he said a safe abortion, I guess, is an abortion where only one person dies. Is something safe? If you are guaranteed to kill another person, how is that safe? It's like a oxymoron, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
It's like saying a safe execution.
Right.
Well, how is there a safe execution?
Abortion only has one intention, and it's to kill an innocent human life. And it's actually shouldn't be in the doctor's description. Doctors they say an oath to save life, and always, no matter what. Abortion ends a human life, and that's the only purpose of it. Doctors technically shouldn't even be touching and thinking about abortion because that is not their job description.
So another question that was asked was, what do you think about the companies paying for women to get to a state that they can get an abortion in, like Yelp or Uber?
I know California has been trying to push legislation and laws and to get funding for women to send them to places so they can get abortions. Mm-hmm. And obviously, like that is just that is helping them to destroy their lives because they're thinking these women obviously don't have. So if they don't have abortion, they're thinking, oh, I don't have a support, so I'm just gonna go to these people who are saying, I'm going to pay for my abortion, they're making it easy so they don't have to come to the realization that a human life is inside me. They're trying to make it so easy that they can't think about what is inside them, so that they can just get it done easily. That's why Planned Parenthood never shows ultrasounds. That's why abortion clinics don't show them, because they know that they're going to keep the baby, and it's a high chance they're going to keep the baby after they see their ultrasound. And women have asked, can I see my ultrasound? They've said no, because they know they're not going to make their money if they show the ultrasound. So these people are still going to make their money if they give money for them to go to these abortion clinics. The abortion industry is still going to make money because they're worried about losing money. And they say that only 3% of our services are abortion. That's so untrue, because in Texas, when the heartbeat law went in place, abortion clinics started shutting down. Do you think that's really 3% of their services if they're starting to shut down? I don't think so.
Yeah. And, you know, I think that do you think, so I'll ask you this from a political perspective, because you were in Oklahoma, right, when they passed the new law. Explain that law.
Yep. Called the Life at Conception Act.
Okay.
So, like it says in the title, protects life from the moment of conception, and with no exceptions. And this law is a very strong pro-life law, and I think only Arkansas has it in place as well. So it's only 2 states, and it's very historical because, like I said, only one other state has it. And it was a big win for the pro-life movement, because despite a pro-abortion administration, we in the states have been able to push pro-life legislation. And it's very encouraging to see, because that just shows we are a pro-life America, and that we want to see Roe v. Wade reversed. And with laws like this, it shows that Roe v. Wade, that it shows to the Supreme Court that the American people don't want to. It's actually over 79% of people think there should be restrictions on abortion. So a lot of people don't know that. A lot of people want to see restrictions on it.
So
and
you said 73% of people
79.
79 believe that there should be restrictions.
Yep.
To some degree.
To some degree. Yeah, whether they're not fully pro-life or not, like they think there's restrictions.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for someone who's been around the political world in all of this, would you say that people on the other side of that argument that say, hey, abortion should be legal, it should be legal, free, and free access, easy access, do they truly believe that the baby is just not human, and then therefore it's kind of like, hey, you're putting an inconvenience on a woman? Or do you think that it's from a cynical perspective, or do you think there's a little mixture of both?
I think it depends on the audience. So the abortion industry knows very well that is a human life. That's why they have strategies, and when they train people at Planned Parenthood and abortion clinics, they train them, don't say baby, don't show them the ultrasound, don't do this. They have all these don'ts that show humanity. They say fetus, say clump of cells, say these things, because they know very well that those are triggers, and that's what's going to change people's hearts and minds. Abby Johnson, I don't know if you've seen the movie Unplanned, but it's an amazing pro-life story of this woman who was a manager at this Planned Parenthood. She helped convince like thousands of women to have abortions. And she left eventually when she saw an abortion herself. And now she's a big pro-life speaker and activist today. And because she saw the humanity of the child, it instantly changed her mind. And she was working in it for years. So they know that it's human. That's why they take out the humanity. But the women that are don't know.
So you're saying that they intentionally, the people in, you said Planned Parenthood and these abortion clinics, they know the science, so they know this is a person, but we're not going to let the mom know that, because if they understand that this is a baby or a human, if we show the ultrasound, they're going to realize, she's going to be like, what the heck am I doing? Is that what you're saying?
So
Mm-hmm.
they get you on the science of it, like you were talking about, Zach, and then they hit you with the psychology aspect of it, right? Like, don't say baby, don't use this word, don't use that word, because then that'll hit the emotions of the person having the baby, and that'll probably cause them to more likely want to have the baby instead of aborting it, which is pretty tricky and just kind of evil, if you ask me.
Yep.
So do you think that the politicians know this, or do you think that they're more like, because I like to try to understand the other side of an argument. Do you think that there is truly a belief that I am doing the right thing? Or do you think it's like, even if I hear any truth about it, I don't care. I'm not listening to it because I know that's what it is and I really don't care? Or is there some form of like, you know, something cynical going on? Because that's one thing that I wonder when it comes to Christians, quote unquote, and politicians back in the day that pushed for Jim Crow, pushed for slavery, or Christians in Nazi Germany that said what they were doing was okay. Do you think that there is a sense of like a block that's there, or do you think that they know and they're really just trying to disguise, like, yeah, I'm a believer too. I'm really for other people, but I'm really not.
Mm-hmm. I think a majority of politicians really don't know the magnitude of abortion and don't know when human life actually begins. But it really depends on the politician. Like there are a lot of politicians I know that very well versed in the issue, whether they're pro-abortion or pro-life.
Mm-hmm.
Like they know their stuff and they take their stand. But there are a good chunk of politicians that really just don't care or don't know. And because they don't know, they don't care.
Mm.
So a lot of politicians will focus on a lot of other issues. And that's why it's super important to keep people that say that they're pro-life politicians, to keep them accountable to actually vote pro-life, push pro-life legislation, because it hasn't been it hasn't been a top issue, but now it's becoming a top issue because it's so polarized and talked about so much. So I think a lot of politicians still have a lot to learn when it comes to the pro-life issue. So
Mm-hmm.
but it does really depend on the state, the legislature, because there's the House, there's the Senate, there's state politics, there's federal politics. So it's like it really depends on the circle. But I think a lot of politicians don't really know a lot about it, and they don't know how to vote on it because they're hearing women's rights. Then they're like, oh, right to life. It's in our 14th Amendment. Like, so they're getting pulled in all these different like.
So if go
Yeah.
ahead, go ahead.
No, I was just finishing with thought that they're pulled in all these different messaging that they can't understand.
So if they, but the thing I wonder is if they really don't understand, why are they so adamant about it? Because in reality, if this one issue, if everyone agreed, like all politicians pretty much agreed on this one issue, then the political landscape would change drastically.
Mm-hmm.
And it almost seems like people on either side are really fighting hard for this one issue, and I wonder why. So, like, for example, when it came to like gay marriage, for example, people on the right pretty much didn't support it. People on the left did, but then a couple years go by, and now everyone's pretty much like on the same page with it. It is what it is. They're like, yeah, whatever. Starting to kind of get like that with the whole transgender stuff. Different topic for another day. But actually, I don't even think we'll talk about that one ever. But anyway, it's like this has been going on for years, right? This has been going on since the beginning. This is not something where, like, for example, civil rights, Jim Crow, slavery, voting law, things like that. Should women be able to vote? Should black people be able to vote? All this. Everyone's on the same page with that at this point. Like, that kind of stuff shifted over like a decade or so. This one hasn't changed. And when I see that, like, this side wants this side wants this, and no one's willing to budge at all, that tells me, okay, that's an important issue, and I wonder why and maybe it should be more of a relevant thing of my decision to vote and who I vote for than I think it is, because I think a lot of times us as believers, especially us as like minorities, we kind of look at it as a secondary issue. And so, you know, for me, just looking at it from the outside, I'm like, okay, this is one that hasn't budged on either side in like 50 years. There's something important there. I need to understand that, and then I need to pick a side.
Yeah, it's so polarized because it's a life and death issue. It's just that simple. With a life and death issue, it's a serious issue. And I think because our world has become so progressive very quickly since especially since the sexual revolution, it's become more and more polarized because both sides, because conservatives have wanted to keep the traditional values, and the progressives have wanted to get even more. So it's become more, we haven't been able to agree because our society is becoming so much more progressive, and it's a harder issue to come in agreement on because a lot of people that are on the other side aren't Christians either too, and a lot of people that are conservative Christians. So it's becoming faith. This pro-life issue is also like a lot of Christians can see the sanctity of human life naturally because it says the Bible very clearly, but then people oftentimes on the left that most of them aren't Christian don't see that. So it's also becoming, like God said, the world is going to get worse and worse, and then there's going to be there's going to be less Christians, and then the world's going to come to an end, and there's going to be like standing. So I would even argue
this really isn't a new topic. Mm-hmm. So when we go into like the history, and for everybody that just hopped on, well, I'll show this at the end, but when we go back to go back to church history, you said you're Eastern Orthodox?
Yep.
So I'm sure you've heard of the Didache before.
Mm-hmm.
Have you read it?
No.
Okay, so the Didache, for anyone who just doesn't know what that is, it was writings by the early church fathers, and it's essentially like people who, like, now when you're trying to figure out what does the church believe, you go to the website and you see about us, and then you see the pastor and all this, you see what do we believe, you know? And the Didache was that for the early church fathers, like early church. And this is before the split with the Orthodox and all this. This is like when all there was just Christian. There were no other denominations. And and in there, interestingly enough, there is a section that says it is wrong for us to kill children inside the womb or outside of the womb. Mm-hmm. So I would argue that it's really not even a new issue. I would say that it's something that's been going on for a long time.
Yep. Abortion, we actually don't even know how long it's been around, but it very well could have been from that, like, pretty much the beginning, because the first that we see abortion is, I believe, like 1400s, where it's called quickening, which is basically someone took poison to poison the baby, and oftentimes it poisoned both them and the baby. But very well there could have been, because that was the only documentation we had. But yeah, it very well could have been way before that, where abortions were occurring in their own ways at the time. So yeah, that's a very good point.
Yeah.
It's just becoming more polarized now, even though it's been an issue for a while. It's becoming more polarized because politics have gotten more involved. The Supreme Court's gotten more involved. Both political parties have gotten more involved. Everyone's been getting more involved when it comes to our world in general. So it's kind of hard to explain why, or like to really fully understand why. But I think it just comes down to, it's a life and death issue. And people are realizing the magnitude of what abortion is with our technology today. Where we, at a click of our phone, we can see what an abortion is. Things are more accessible, and you can do more of your own research.
So for everybody that's just joined in, one of the first things we talked about was how you said there are states in our country and politicians in our country today that have justified and said partial birth, abortion is okay. And this is a diagram of what partial birth abortion looks like. So right here, you've got, a baby, and then it's pulled out by the legs, and then it's pulled out to where its shoulders are out. And once the shoulders are out, its neck is then broken, and the brain is severed, spine is severed, something. And at that point, even very early on, babies can feel pain. Babies can dream. Babies can hear their mother's voice. So that hurts.
Mm-hmm.
And we have two more questions that I think that we have for you before we hop off.
Okay.
One question says, what do you think of companies buying and selling fetal tissue and using it for medical purposes?
Mm-hmm. So inhumane. That's back right to Nazi Germany right there. Burning the Jews for fuel, burning them for fires, using people that are deemed as unworthy and not human for their own value and treating them as slaves. And you can go back to slavery on that. Absolutely inhumane and barbaric, in my opinion. And there's actually, just recently, there was proof that the medical waste at abortion clinics, which is the babies, they use those to light up lights in Maryland. And they use their burning.
What do you mean they use it to light up lights?
So they use that fuel of like burning those bodies for electricity and for the lights in Maryland. There's just some news that came out about that.
Someone asked, what if the baby's already deceased, like natural causes?
Like you would with anyone else that died. What would you do? You would bury them. You have a funeral. You would treat them with dignity and respect, like they deserve, like any other human being. You should not use for your own purposes.
You wouldn't use grandma for the lights.
Mm-mm.
Like, so why would you? Grandma died. You're just gonna use her for the lights, huh?
Grandma.
Might as well use her up as much as we can. No, you use people. That's not how you treat other people. Like, see, we've come to a society that's just like been so come to be so selfish in a culture of death and be like, oh, how can we use them to as much as we can, or like this their benefit. That's not how you treat other people.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then he asked, does the same apply to organ donors from dead donors? But I would say
that's not.
I would say they choose. Well, but they're choosing their donation, so they're choosing to do it. I think it's actually illegal to take a dead person and just take their heart and like dig up the grave and do that. So I think if someone like has that little heart, the organ donor thing, it's okay. I think it's legal, and that's different.
And that's so different because that's giving part of your organs. That's not giving up your whole body to be burned and disrespected. You chose to save other lives, and this is saving life. Like, you're saving another life through giving one of your organs, but that's not treating you with disrespect and not like burying you or having a memorial or funeral or anything like that. You still do those things. So it's very different because you're also not killing that person to get those things done.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Yeah. Very different.
And then the last question is what women's rights can Christians back that don't fall under pro-choice or my body, my choice?
Title IX. For pregnant women on campuses that get kicked out of classes, that can't live on campus, that can't do any of that, advocate for women's rights for single mothers on campuses, and to advocate for pregnancy resources to help these women, and also in churches to advocate for women that are in crises. It's just amazing how much a little love and support can go, how long of a way that can go, and just some kindness. So women's rights don't including abortion. Women's rights is the opposite of women's rights. it's exploiting women. Susan B. Anthony, who was one of the first feminists and suffragettes, said abortion is the greatest exploitation of women. So abortion is the opposite of women's rights. It exploits women and destroys the gift they've been given of fertility. People think pregnancy is a disease and fertility is gross. That should be a gift to be embraced by women. Women can do that. Men can't. Women should embrace that instead of thinking, oh, how can we be just like men and do things more than men? No, women are unique from men. We're supposed to do what men can't do. So embrace the things that men can't do. That is women's rights, and that is true feminism, in my opinion.
And I would even say another good thing is that you can support is don't let dudes compete against women in wrestling and swimming and stuff like that. But but that's another topic. And you stayed on for 2 hours. We don't want to take up too much of your time. We appreciate you for coming on. And hopefully you can come on again and we can have another conversation like this, because I think there's so many facets to this topic that you can address, because I didn't know about the partial birth stuff. I didn't know about the, what did you call it in New York that they allowed?
Infanticide.
Infanticide, where basically if the mother doesn't want the baby and they tried and the baby is born, they're able to kill it. And so how much of a political issue this really is in our country, and how, we don't know as much as we probably should.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would love to come back on and discuss this. I mean, this is what I do for a living, and I love talking about it. It's sad we have to talk about these things, but if we don't speak up, who's going to speak up?
Right.
There you go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. We appreciate you.
Of course.
You got anything? Last minute questions? Anything like that? See, love?
No, she answered everything that I could possibly think of, man. I learned some new information tonight that I did not know about. So I definitely thank you for that. Thank you for joining us.
Of course.
And informing the people.
Mm-hmm. If you ever have any questions, or if you're having conversations with people over DMs or in person, don't hesitate to reach out. I would love to send you resources or just, talk. I love working the pro-life movement. So if you ever get in those situations, just let me know. Or if you know a woman that needs resources, I'm your person. I would love to help you out with that. So don't hesitate ever to reach out.
Sure. For everybody that's just now that was on that didn't follow us, that maybe followed her, we have a YouTube channel, so we put all these lives on YouTube, so you can watch the replay if you missed some of it. And like I said, we're going to try to have her back on again, so make sure you follow the YouTube. Make sure you follow her Instagram. You have a couple different accounts, some professional and personal. What are those, so that people can follow you there?
Yeah, so my pro-life account, which is the one right now, Savanna .forlife. And then my personal account, which I've had way longer because I had that since I was younger, is Savanna .sunshine. So that's my more personal. I have a lot of pro-life stuff on that one, but it's more of kind of like fun stuff as well. But my pro-life account's like all pro-life. You get all information on there, news, all that. So.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much again. This is so great to do, and I really appreciate it. So hopefully we can do it again soon.
Yeah,
yes, thank you.
Of course.
All right. Well, we will see you guys next week, and hopefully we'll have another great conversation. Thank you for checking this out. Make sure to follow C Love, follow Savanna. Kaz TV, we do skits, funny stuff, but once a week we have these good conversations about controversial topics from a biblical perspective, and we're open to all sorts of opinions, unless, of course, you are in the other room yelling at the person on the camera, and then we're not going to do that. We're going to do it where you're on camera and you're talking. So
you're going to see this.
You're going to see it. You're going to see that. So, C-Love, go ahead and take it away, man.
Okay. So remember to please follow us, Kaz TV. Follow us on YouTube as well. IMC Love, Zach Richardson. We are Cast TV. We do this every Wednesday. Y'all have a good night. Peace.